Pitter patter, let's get at her. It is another episode of the Manely Broncos Podcast, and we are excited to be joined by a former coach of the CU Buffaloes, and of course, numerous college football teams. But obviously, I'm sure you've heard him on the airwaves down there over on 92.5 Altitude Radio with Chris Dempsey from Monday through Friday. Mike Sanford. It's we've been actually interacting here and there, so we were finally able to, get him on. And Mike, thank you so much for hopping on, man. We're really looking forward to getting your takes, of course. With the first preseason, basically come and went, and of course, practices are still going on. But thanks for stopping by, man.
No, it's great to be on, Cam and Brandon. I like your taco background, especially. That definitely stands out. But yeah, I appreciate your guys' work. I follow both you guys and what you do. And Cam in particular, I feel like I've got to know you, even though I don't even know if we've met in person yet. But yeah, I feel like I've got to know you, and always love your enthusiasm for the Broncos, all things Denver sports. So it's and I love the throwback altitude hat too, by the way. That is showtime.
You and I've been interacting. I will try and find a way where I can, if this hat is lying around where we're at, I think we're in the Peakview location. If that hat is lying around somewhere, I will grab it, and then you and I can meet up, and then
that'd be awesome.
And then
we'll make a deal. We'll buy you coffee, and you give me a throwback altitude hat, and then I'll rock it on the air.
That's really perfect. Fun. Yeah, that's perfect. Because the truth be told, it was literally because they do these things like in the Peakview location where things were just lying around, hats and everything. And, I work on the OSG media group side. So like the outdoor channel, sportsman channel, that sort of thing. And, just in the break room, this hat was lying around, and I was just like, I'm not taking a hunting hat. Are you kidding me? I'm seeing this Altitude Sports hat. No, I'm going to be taking this for sure. So, unfortunately, I didn't see anyone. Of course, I didn't see anything else from lying around. So, yeah,
awesome.
Well, Brandon, you doing well? Aside from the glorious background.
Yeah, dude, we had Broncos football last weekend.
We did.
Holy shit! I'm just blown away. Like, I know it's preseason, but we're here. It's back. Like, I can actually watch football and enjoy it, and not just have to look at the rookie class for the 40th time and be like, oh, what are they going to do? Now I can be like, oh, they actually played a game. So I'm hyped. Yeah. Also, Big Mike, I'm sorry, I have not tried your Wingstop order. I want to do it. I just wanted to get that out of the way. I will do it. I'm trying to be healthy right now. So a little bit of backstory. So Big Mike has this Wingstop order that he sent in called the Big Mike. He sent it to me last week. He was like, the homework is you have to try this by next week and tell me what it's like. It's a garlic parm chicken sandwich with 2 Louisiana rub wings and a side of cheese fries. And I'm just like, bro, don't torture me. This is bad for my diet. I want it so badly. I will try it, and I will tell you how it goes. Yeah, but I haven't had it yet. That's all I want to say. I had to tell him that while he's here. I'm doing well.
Wingstop does low-key smack, though. Man, that place is good.
That sounds so good. I'm scared.
I'm lucky that I don't have one within 15 miles of where I live, because I had it one time. There's a location in Longmont, and that was actually the first time I had it. It was like 6 months ago, and I don't know why. I always thought it was just like the affiliated wing place with Pizza Hut, so I didn't think it was legit. Yeah. And I don't know, my whole life, I was like, it's Wingstop. It's just right next to Pizza Hut, right?
Well, it's funny because for the longest time it was paired with Pizza, and then now it's by its own. And
I didn't even know it actually was. I thought it.
Honestly, I never knew that. That was the thing.
That's what I thought. I thought so. So, that's awesome.
So first things first, obviously, it's at least appropriate we talk about the main topic, the main course. The main course is your, and that would be the quarterback room, and specifically Bo Nix. Mike, obviously, I know you have been big with the Bo Nix and Denver Broncos train, even before Nix was a Denver Bronco. You actually specifically were a huge fan of Michael Penix as well. Michael Penix and Bo Nix for the Broncos. And from the coaching side of things, what was it for you, at least on the surface, before heading into the preseason Broncos, that sort of thing, and then, of course, seeing what he did in the preseason? Did it surprise you at all?
Yeah, so I'd say this: nothing surprised me at all with the draft pick. With Bo Nix being drafted by Sean Payton, like what I saw is a great fit between a quarterback that has a good skill set in Bo Nix, but one of probably his greatest attribute from a draftable perspective was that he's operated in an offense and done it very efficiently and very much on schedule. And I will say, so Sean Payton comes from an era of the West Coast offense where ball's out of your hand, you play on schedule. And we can be honest here and say that if you watch the trends in the NFL, particularly over the last, we'll say decade, and Patrick Mahomes, certainly over the last 5-6 years, there's been a trend towards off schedule football, right? So, I had a chance to coach against Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. While I was the interim head coach at CU. And in fact, I don't know if they were back-to-back weeks, pretty close to it. They were within a 3-week span. And Bo Nix, you knew was going to operate Oregon's offense very well and had tremendous skill around him. And as a result, was highly efficient. I knew he was a really good athlete too. He came into, being a 5-star quarterback to go to Auburn because of his athleticism, because he was a really good dual threat quarterback. So I knew that part of him as well. My Michael Penix Jr. fandom, it started because I watched him play, obviously studying him, getting ready for a game, and watching a catalog of throws that he just unleashes consistently. And then it frankly, I was up there in Seattle on the sideline, and he was the quarterback 4 weeks in a row. It was Caleb Williams, it was Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., Cam Rising of Utah. He was the one quarterback that I was like, this guy scares the living crap out of me because he can do things with a football that I frankly haven't seen, very often outside of two quarterbacks I've been with as a coach, in Andrew Luck and Jordan Love. And I thought Michael Penix Jr. might even be a better thrower of the football than those two guys. And so that was probably my firsthand experience of why I was so big on the Michael Penix Jr. train. But I did think that there were aspects of his game, even a lefty, that I didn't necessarily think was going to be a realistic landing place here in Denver. But I have seen from the jump, that Bo Nix was going to be a great fit with Sean Payton. And I think week 1 of preseason proved that, that it is a good fit. And I think fit between the quarterback and the head coach, especially when that head coach is essentially he's calling a lot of shots, not just on the field, but organizationally. And so you want, when you've gone out and hired somebody with the experience of Sean Payton, you want him to feel really good about his selection of quarterback. And I think all along that was Bo Nix. And you can tell even right now that the fit is good.
Mm-hmm. In early returns, it was a great preseason game. Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest takeaways, was I think for the first preseason game is you want to make sure that he belongs. And he answered that, right? He answered that, with the bell. And I mean, so much was made about, his preseason performance. And, there were some people that really didn't like it. Some people that thought, he was a bit skittish. And I think there were times where he was skittish at times, so, like the footwork in the pocket. But I mean, just from the simple fact that he was calm and he was cool and he was collected for the vast majority of that preseason, I think was one of the biggest takeaways for me.
I would agree with that. I hear from Brandon.
Yeah, it was just kind of refreshing to me because I just feel like I was actually watching a quarterback. And like the fact that that's a sentence that I just had to say is terrifying. But I literally haven't felt that way. I haven't felt that way. I think the last time I maybe felt that way was like Teddy Bridgewater a little bit. But no, I mean, Bo came out there. He looked a little shaky on his first drive, but like that's to be expected. It's his first drive in the NFL. Like he started 60 games in college, but that's college. Like that's
ultimately different. It was a scoring drive, right?
It was a scoring drive.
Funny. I mean, at the end of the day, Sean Payton today at his presser, which I had a chance to be at practice today and be in the scrum, actually asked my first ever question in a media scrum of a coach, which was actually terrifying because I've always been on the other side of the podium. So, but he did say that, the main objective of a quarterback is to lead his team to scoring drives, period. He did that on basically every drive minus the Lucas Kroll fumble, which he had nothing to do with.
Yeah. Man, that was a brutal fumble. But no, I mean, it was definitely just refreshing to see. And he just looked poised. Like, he came out there, he had that shaky first drive, even though he still led a scoring drive. It looked a bit shaky. He had that great throw in the run to Cortland, who, and I'm just excited for Cortland Sutton to have like a legitimate quarterback. Let me just say that. But I was impressed. Like, it's interesting to me, the amount of people that come out here that say, like, I just feel like the discourse of people that said like, oh, he had a great game, and then the people that just said, oh, he had a horrible game. I'm just like, are we watching the same game? Like, was it perfect? No. Was it going to be perfect? No. But I don't know. I think it was promising. I think he had a great game. I think, again, just seeing some kind of consistency from the quarterback position in actually being able to score points was just so refreshing to see. I mean, the one thing that just like, it just hurts me is the Josh Reynolds throw. Like, that's, to me, that's on Josh Reynolds. Like, that was, you couldn't have put it in a better spot. I think if Bo completes that, he probably like feels a little bit better about like coming out of that game. Not that I don't know how his kind of reaction to that was, but I feel like that would also like maybe alleviate some of the people that have been like, and this is just tells me they didn't actually watch the game, but I feel like the thing that I've seen the most often is like, oh, we didn't do anything down the field. I'm like, yes, he did. They didn't catch the ball. Like, that's not on him. He couldn't have put it in a better spot. He threw 2 deep passes that turned into DPIs. Like, I struggled to see. I mean, yeah, was it not perfect? Was it an imperfect first game? Yes, but I honestly don't know if it could have gone better. From the standpoint of, this is his first game in the NFL. I don't care how many games he started in college. It's a totally different game. Still getting on the same page with these receivers. For a little bit there, he's playing behind a second string offensive line, which he looked good behind them as well. Like, you're not going to see, like, not going into this knowing we're not going to see situations that we saw with Russell Wilson where like he just runs into a sack every other play. Is just, even that alone is going to do so much for this offense that even if Bo isn't a good thrower of the football, like, that's going to help, but he also is looking like an actual quarterback. So I'm excited.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I personally come from a place of, I do have a respect of Russell Wilson's, you know, totality of his career. I do. You know, and I think that similar to, you know, certain quarterbacks like just Zach Wilson in New York, you know, this was a bad situation, a bad marriage from the jump between Russell Wilson and Nathaniel Hackett, because Nathaniel Hackett was hired to get Aaron Rodgers, didn't get that done. And then it was a very bad marriage between Russell Wilson and Sean Payton. So I agree with what you say about, we have, over the course of the time since I've lived here in the Denver metro, we haven't seen really good, consistent quarterback play. But I do think that, you know, frankly, don't be surprised if Russell Wilson has a good year this year. Yeah. Don't be surprised, because they will build that thing around his skill sets, which are to, you know, heavy run game, hard play action game, let the ball fly down the air. He throws one of the best deep balls still in the National Football League. But him being in a compact offense, you know, where it's dink and dunk, it's not his game. And I just don't think the marriage was right. But, you know, one thing that as I hear you talking, Brandon, about Bo Nix, and I wanted to bring up just because I'm thinking about it, you know, obviously all eyeballs were on Bo Nix. That was the storyline. What's he going to look like? And then all the recap is frankly on Bo Nix. Does it, I'm not going to say concern you, but is there a little bit of a kind of an equalizer here in the sense that frankly, all 3 quarterbacks probably looked equally good in this preseason environment? And, you know, Jarrett Stidham did it over the course of 11 snaps, right? And 4 for 7. You know, he had, you know, basically the play to Samaje Perine, we know would have been actually a chunk play, would have led to a scoring drive. Instead, Samaje Perine volleyball sets it, you know, for an interception. And that's not on Jarrett Stidham. You know, Zach Wilson was 10 of 13. And the knock on Zach Wilson is he holds onto the ball too much. I mean, he was playing behind the 3rd string offensive line the entire time. And I've been at training camp about every day it's been available. That 3rd string offensive line I was concerned about. And he got rid of the football. to the tune of well over 75% completion percentage. So if all three of these quarterbacks are having similar type of successes relative to the preseason, relative to the system, can they all be that good?
I mean, I would hope so. Let's keep building up the trade value and send one of them to Minnesota. I'm just gutted for all Vikings fans.
I know
right now.
Jordan Addison might have torn his ACL today.
I think I don't know if it was confirmed that he did, but I think that's what they're thinking happened.
You know, you have JJ McCarthy with the meniscus surgery.
JJ McCarthy had meniscus. They lost their other starting cornerback at an ACL. And then the one that they drafted literally passed away.
Unbelievable. I mean, you can't make it up, man.
Wild. But anyway, I mean, I think going into the game, obviously all the eyes were on Bo Nix, but I think this, in my opinion, it's not necessarily that they're making it about the other quarterbacks are coming in and making this about like a 3-quarterback race in the sense that like, hey, like, look at us. We're also like, actually look good. To me, it's just about Sean Payton. It's about Sean Payton, like, proving that he's the guy that everyone up until it feels like for the last year thought that he was, which is one of the best offensive minds in the history of the sport. And for some reason, you saw people come out of the woodwork of like, oh, well, Sean Payton isn't actually that good. He's overrated. He's too hard to play with, or like play under. Obviously, I don't know how many of these things are necessarily true, but I just feel like that kind of started to pop up and creep up everywhere. And now it's like, and again, no disrespect to Russell Wilson. Like I do have respect for what he's done in his career. I think he's a great guy, but I also am just like, yeah, this is the Sean Payton that we traded for. The Sean Payton that can take any quarterback and set up a system to like show success in this offense as long as that quarterback can do what Sean Payton tells them to do. So I definitely I'm excited to see that they are all looking good. Personally, my opinion was like, obviously Bo had the most, did he have more snaps than Zach Wilson, or it was really close?
They're both 30, I think it was like 33-36. So yeah,
it was something in there.
Yeah.
I think Zach, well, let me first of all say Zach Wilson impressed me more than I expected him to, but I think Bo, to me, like already, I think it's pretty obvious he's the starter. Right now, I think it's a battle of Zach Wilson and Jarrett Stidham of like who's going to back him up. And I'm excited to see what happens there, because I think Zach Wilson, like, if he can turn it around with Sean Payton, like he was in a horrible situation in New York. He was a second overall pick for a reason. I would not be mad to have him be our backup that we know we can rely on. That kind of brings that extra athleticism. That's kind of the one thing that I feel like Jarrett Stidham, not that he can't move at all, like he's not Joe Flacco,
right,
standing in the back there like a tree. But I think, especially with what Bo showed you with like what he can do with his legs, you know, Zach can kind of also do that. So like having a backup quarterback in the system that's a similar style of play, I think Zach is more of a gunslinger than Bo is, but that would be something that I would be excited to have. So I'm excited to see what happens against the Packers. Their defense is legit. Obviously, it sounds like Bo is going to start. They're not going to play the starters, but like I feel like, well, did they confirm that they won't play them at all, or is it just like they're going to only play them for a couple snaps?
Yeah, so I follow that team very closely. Just
they're not going to play them
to Jordan Love. So like right after they had an awesome first preseason game. Like Jordan Love was 2 for 2 with the perfect passer rating for like
Jordan Love is ridiculous.
Yeah,
man.
and so he's definitely not playing.
He's not playing. Yeah,
Matt LaFleur came out and basically said the practice is going to be a lot of the starters. So
okay,
to be honest,
that must have been what it was.
I think there'll be more. Like from my perspective, I'll be there broadcasting live for Altitude 10 to noon. I wish I could just go watch practice instead of being on the air, but it's going to be really fun because I think that's going to be the best data piece that you'll have to this point by far.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
For Bo Nix in particular, because he's going to see and feel how much tighter those windows are with starting defenses that are really running their system. Whereas in a preseason, I mean, there's kind of a gentleman's agreement between head coaches, generally speaking, where you're going to run the same 2-3 coverages. offensively, you're going to run your day 1, day 2 install, and it's just like, there's no game planning that goes into it. So yeah, that's the thing that's interesting.
It's a lot more vanilla. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think that'll be interesting. And, you brought up the point about Sean Payton showing his mettle, right? As a play caller, that he is, after Sunday, I think there was definitely a sentiment, even with myself, and I think a lot of Broncos fans, that's what we traded to get. That's where this franchise is paying a lot of money, maybe one of the top 3 highest paid coaches in the NFL. But when will you know that for sure? That is like that is accurate. That is the real deal. Is it preseason, or is it going to be in the middle of this season?
I mean, you're definitely not going to know it in the preseason, but I just feel like being able to see, I mean, to me, it says something to have a rookie quarterback, a veteran quarterback that's kind of been just sent around, and a younger quarterback that has the tools but's kind of been written off a little bit. Look good. I mean, it's preseason, but I mean, it's interesting to me to see. And obviously we're not going to know, right? Like, we're not going to know. We're not going to know if this is the Sean Payton that we expected to get until probably late into this season, or even depending on if we make the postseason, that's where you would really see it. But I just think it's interesting how stark the difference is here with, and like, statistically, last year, Russell Wilson had like a good year by the numbers, but it just looked rough. And it just, to me, it already seems different. And it's not just the quarterback. It's like I feel like it's just how Sean wants to run the offense and how he was forced to run it in a certain way when he had Russell Wilson. And obviously it's one preseason game. And like, there's a lot more data and football that we need to see here, because this is like probably the smallest sample size you could possibly imagine. But that's just what I'm most interested in watching with this. Is it's not even really how good do the quarterbacks look. It's just because like Bo's going to be the starter. He's going to be the starter. They took him 12th for a reason. But it's like, what does the offense around these quarterbacks look like, regardless of who the quarterback is? And is it more clear that Sean can do what he wants to do now as opposed to what he had to do?
Yeah, and I would piggyback off that. Today at practice, it was a really interesting practice, because usually the media setup and the broadcasting radio partners are all on one field, and that's we really just see individual drills. We don't have a chance to see the competitive 11-on-11s very often. And today's practice was all right in front of us, and it was awesome, because one thing that I noticed from today's practice that goes with the theme of Sean Payton really having this being his offense, this being his team, is he stops right in the middle of practice. I mean, multiple times today, and just coached up the detail of exactly where he wants a route to be. And I'm talking like 2.5, like 2 minutes, 3 minutes of like offense linemen are standing around waiting for, the next play. And he's coaching up the depth of a bubble screen, the exact footwork, the snap point. And I thought, I'm like, that's pretty cool. He knows he has a young football team. He knows there's some really fun young pieces. Devon Bailey, Audric Estime, still Marvin Mims Jr. is a young piece for sure. And then his quarterback. And he's going to do what's required to get this offense up to speed and to play with the minute detail that Sean Payton offenses are consistently known for. And so I thought that was a really cool anecdote from today's practice.
So speaking of practice, and this kind of question is about from everything you've seen. So practice, what we've seen in the preseason just so far, like what is the thing that jumps out to you the most about, I guess we could say the quarterbacks, but specifically Bo, and like how he operates Sean Payton's offense?
Well, I think the number one storyline, outside of the quarterback position room, because I think there's even some great storylines about Stidham versus Zach Wilson. I think that's a really fun conversation to have. You can go so many different ways with that. I think it's the receiver room, because there is a bit of redundancy in the receiver room. And I think sometimes, like, if you look at the best teams in the National Football League that have dynamic playmakers on the outside, like you know who they are, right? And right now, I think there's a little bit of parity in the receiver room. So I think there's going to be I think it's a good thing in the sense that there's quality depth, but I think it's a bad thing in the sense that nobody's really standing out at the daily training camp, from a receiver standpoint. Like, it's not like Cortland Sutton's just out there eating on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy that I'm just being candid, like the guy that's just consistently made the most plays, it's been Devon Vele and Josh Reynolds, those two guys. They've made the most plays. And, like Marvin Mims has had a fairly quiet training camp. Tim Patrick's had a fairly quiet training camp. Then Brandon Johnson's been fantastic. David Sills the fifth, he's been awesome. I don't know if you guys saw this. Yeah. Michael Bandy's been great. So I think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword because I think there's going to be really good depth, but I don't know if they have the top line guy that a lot of teams do have, a true number one. I think there's clearly going to be the void of that. And one of the storylines too has been Troy Franklin's been struggling. He's been fairly non-existent, and that's, interesting to say the least.
So I was actually going to bring that up next here as well, but I'll let Cam ask his question.
No, I mean, as far as Franklin, there's been so much that was made, what was it, a week ago or even into OTAs when the coaches were kind of railing on, Troy Franklin, being a little bit, harsh on him. You being a coach, does that bother you? And obviously, my thing is that if this is a conversation, come a year from now, year and a half from now, and we're still having these same problems, that's an issue.
I think the scarier thing, because I've been there and seen some of these interactions, and they've been more like very vocal, exhorting is the right word, Troy Franklin to play with the details that are being asked of him in this offense. And it was pretty animated. I'd say for the first 5, 6, 7 practices, it was very animated in OTAs when I was there. It's got a little quieter. And I think that's a little more concerning, to be honest, because I think sometimes you're trying to get something out of a player and you can only lead the horse to drink, but you can't drink for the horse. And I think that there's some concerns right now. And it's almost the thing that Troy Franklin's consistently done in this training camp. He's gotten behind defenders. Vertical routes, he has gotten behind defenders. But if I can count on one hand the amount of times he's come down with the football in competitive situations.
Yeah.
And so, I can't count on every limb and, my toes and my fingers, how many times he's gotten behind the defense and had a chance to make a play. And then it showed up in the game. I mean, I think the ball in the fourth quarter, Zach Wilson threw him on a go ball, left it outside, was beautiful. That was a perfect throw. He's got to make that play. I mean, that's what you're there to do. That's what you're drafted to do. And I think that he is a developmental player at this stage. I have very personally, and this is just my one man's opinion, this isn't based on any information, I have very little reason to believe he'll be on the 53-man roster. I think he'll end up being a practice squad player. And anybody who thinks that he's going to, won't clear waivers, guys, he slid all the way as a first round grade a year ago. He slid all the way to the 4th round. And so is somebody going to give up an active 53-man spot to put a player that wasn't going to make the 53 if that's the case here in Denver? No, heck no. That's not going to happen. So I do think he could be a developmental player because he does have one thing that this team is a bit deficient on: pure speed. And that's one thing that you cannot coach. You cannot teach. But right now it's just not showing up with a full skill set. Fellas, I gotta jump off here.
Yep.
But
you answered my question.
So. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun talking with you guys. And once again, appreciate what you guys do. So I'm gonna head on out.
We'll do it again, Mike. We'll do it again.
For sure. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah.
So I'll piggyback off of what Mike said, and my question actually I'll just direct it to you. Obviously, that feels like this puts the team in a difficult position with the wide receiver room in terms of like, what do you do with Troy Franklin? And like, that was what I was going to ask him, and he kind of already laid it out of like, maybe it's a practice squad guy, but with how good the rest of the wide receivers are looking and how much you need to rely on good play from your wide receiver room when you have a rookie quarterback, and just in general, like what do you think the solution here is? Like, or do you agree? Do you think it's like Troy Franklin's going to go to the practice squad, or are we going to use a 53-man roster spot on him, and then like one of these other guys that's good and making plays is going to get kicked to the curb and probably maybe make it to the practice squad, maybe not. Like, what do you think?
I think I don't see how he's on the practice squad, but I mean, you can't rule anything out. I mean, you can't rule anything out. But it may also, force them to carry 7 wide receivers. It may force them to carry 7 wide receivers if they truly feel like they don't want to lose him. If they put him on the practice squad, and I see the comments, about like, IR Franklin. You can't IR someone who's not hurt.
If he's not injured, you can't put him on the IR. He can take a redshirt year, but he's taking up a spot.
And you would almost have to fake an injury for him to, be on IR. I
don't even know what's the, like, if you do that, they get caught. Like, what is the punishment for that? I don't know if there's like a.
I will say this though, it should not come as a surprise based on what we saw with Marvin Mims. That we do redshirt him this year. So the difference with Marvin Mims and the difference with Roy Franklin was Mims was a 2nd-round draft pick. Franklin was a 4th-round draft pick. That said, I wouldn't be surprised if he's on the roster, which is what I expect. He'll be on the roster, but he will be probably redshirted this particular year. And then the question is just going to be, what is the future, hold for him? One question I'd like to have for Mike, and one of the questions I was really hoping to ask him, he coached against Riley Moss, and this is another conversation, for him. But this, of course, one of the conversations that I wanted to have, at least for us, was Riley Moss, camp-wise, has been, for what's been reported, mixed reviews. He's had a good camp. He's had a bad camp. You know what I mean? But you turn the tape on in that Indianapolis game, and he was an absolute baller. An absolute baller in Indy. And some people even said, I think it's Benjamin Albright, even mentioned that it looks like he's actually running away with the cornerback position.
That's what I saw. Cornerback 2 spot, it says to lose.
And so I think that I'm very curious to see what's going to become of Riley. And, they all say your best ability is availability. And as much as Levi Wallace has looked really good in training camp, he's not out there right now. He's not been out there for about a week and a half. And yes, even Damari Mathis, as much as we've been dogging on him, on the show or even the network, and I'm sure other Bronco podcasts, here and there have been kind of dogging on him a bit. You've got to, you really got to respect the fact about, how well he played. And yes, Chris Abrams-Drain. So I think that, for
Chris Abrams-Drain was a monster as well in that game.
Yeah, so I think that we actually have a real conversation. While it may seem like Moss might be running away with cornerback 2, I actually, from what I saw from preseason 1, feel a little bit better after that game about the cornerback room. It's not resolved. I'm not like standing firm in the sense of like our running back or our cornerback room is very good. It's one of the best in the NFL, not that sort of thing. But I do feel good knowing the fact that Chris Abrams-Drain played really, really well. And Moss, and back to Mathis, the reason why I've probably felt so good about it was the fact that Mathis actually played so well.
Dude, I'm shocked that he didn't come down with that pick.
Yeah.
Early on. That was a hell of a play by him, and it just didn't come down with it. Sometimes that happens, but definitely good to see that Mathis is looking pretty good. Definitely nice to see how well Moss is looking as well. And also nice to see a rookie come in at corner and kind of show up a little bit in Chris Abrams-Drain, because I feel like we haven't really seen a rookie corner come in recently and do good for us. That's a great point about Jim Leonard. And I mean, like, am I wrong in thinking that? Like Riley Moss, who just talked about coming in as a rookie, did almost nothing. Damari Mathis was okay for a little bit and then totally tanked.
Yeah.
And it just kind of feels like we continue to draft these guys as rookies at corner, and they kind of don't. It either takes a while for them to show up, or they just don't really get there.
And another really good point here from Richie, because if you're talking about the number one takeaway that was the cornerback room or in general, was the run defense and just the defensive line.
Run defense. Oh man,
like that.
Roach is gonna eat.
Well, it wasn't just him. I mean, Angelo Blackson had a lot of great moments. DJ Jones was fantastic in the preseason. There was a lot of plays on that defensive line, and frankly, I thought J.L. Skinner actually was better than I actually expected. You know what I mean? But I think where we really saw that was his help in run defense. I think the pass coverage is going to get there. And yeah, we are going to end up getting Uwazurike, because Uwazurike is expected to play at some, at some form in that Packers game. So it's really going to be a true conversation about where he fits in. But I mean, as far as the run defense, I thought it was excellent. Jordan Jackson, for a period in time, wearing number 94, I thought was fantastic. So they really felt like they got a really good run defense. And of course, the edge room was getting there. So I mean, like, Baron Browning was excellent. Jonathan Cooper was great in the run defense as well. And I think that, that's one of the things that you could probably say consistently in being the consistent edge player. Cooper was incredible in that run defense. So to Rich's point, to feed off of that, Brandon, it does make the cornerback room so much better. And of course, that's something that you and I even talked about with the edge room. It makes the edge room so much better.
Well, speaking of the edge room, that was the other kind of player that stood out to me was Jonah Ellis, specifically on that interception that I think it was, I don't remember the quarterback that was in, but they threw a pick. Basically, like, Jonah Ellis had such a just amazing rep to get the pressure in their face quickly, and he had to get the ball out before he wanted to. I don't remember what quarterback was playing at that point.
They had 5 quarterbacks, which is a conversation.
I know, it was ridiculous. So many. It's just hard to follow. But ended up forcing that pick. That was like a pressure pick. And yeah, I mean, Jonah Ellis balled out as well. Ellis might have been the best player on Sunday. I almost don't disagree, but yeah, I mean, he was great. I'm excited to see what he does. It was great to see Tim Patrick back out there. The biggest one, though, to me, like Devon Bailey. First of all, Devon Bailey's already made this roster. Like, I'm 100% confident he's on this roster. And just, it was great to see, the quick decisiveness as well in the red zone from Bo Nix too. And it was just, yeah, I mean, the whole speed out joke, but that's something that we haven't seen. We haven't seen, and I'm going to reset my camera here in a minute because this just looks weird, but we haven't seen, like, we're just so used to quarterbacks holding onto the ball forever and not really knowing what to do and not going through the progression and not making the right read. And whether that's Russell Wilson running around too much, whether that's like Drew Lock just kind of holding on to it a little bit too long, Joe Flacco, it's just like, it's a basic concept, but like, that's what a professional quarterback is supposed to be able to do. And we haven't seen that. So that was nice. I'm going to reset the stream real quick.
As Brandon's resetting his camera, I mean, yeah, it was a really good performance all the way around. It was probably, the reason why he was, Freeze was like, he was just speechless. He was just overall speechless. Brandon was speechless. And that's why he was frozen in the camera, was how good the preseason was for the Broncos.
It was.
But to your Bailey point, I just thought that he was, the point that needs to be made about Bailey is it was a knock. I mean, you certainly can't deny the fact that age is somewhat a concern, but to the other degree of that, he's entering the prime of his career. And I've made the comparison every once in a while to, everybody does that comparison for Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick as Rich A is just commenting. And I think that's fine. I think it's definitely accurate. I think my comparison has always been Marcus Colston.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, Colston, had a little bit more pounds on him. I think it's like, 14, 15, maybe 20 more pounds on him, but they're roughly in the same draft round. I mean, like we're talking about a 7th round draft pick, a player who was forgotten by even their own team who drafted him, in the 7th round. And I think that for Vele, the point I'm trying to make here is he's entering the prime of his career. He's entering the prime of his career. And I think that he's been making plays in training camp. He's been making a play. He's been making plays.
I feel like I've heard his name mentioned the most recently.
Yeah.
In camp.
Again today. Nick Kosmider had the tweet today where it said we're, basically like, come at me if you've heard me say this before, but Devon Bailey is having another great camp, you know. But there was a particular play I wanted to highlight, and everybody's been highlighting it here and there. That play that Bo Nix had, which was the beautiful drop-in throw on the wheel route to Jaleel McLaughlin, which we can talk about Jaleel here. He was a big takeaway too. But Vele smartly, and intellectually blocking the defensive back and shielding him to where you could say it was almost like a pick play. It wasn't, but like he basically shielded it to where Jaleel was basically, in a free route so that corner could not get to there. So it was a very high IQ play by Vele, for him to get out there and really create that space for him. So you can clearly see that, he's 26, but the high IQ and the intelligence of him as a receiver is there, even for the play to Bo Nix, or from Bo Nix to him, and drawing a pass interference penalty. You typically don't see that from rookies. And then that's something that Sean talked about specifically today was, and it's praise for as short of a quote as it was. He just said, Vele's not your typical rookie, or something along those lines. And it's been all throughout camp.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like, did you see the one-handed grab he made in camp as well?
Yeah.
Like last week, I think.
Thanks to a fan at camp who recorded the
video. It's just definitely cool to see. And I feel like we're kind of back on that. What's that?
This is the real question, is we're going to be. Yeah.
I feel like we're back on that. The like every year you got that rookie that shows out, and like I know he's not really technically an undrafted rookie, but like come on, he's close enough. And definitely excited that it's in the wide receiver room, and like there's a lot of names there and a lot of guys, but I think he could. Unfortunately, to be honest, the biggest loser of Devon Vele showing up like this
is Tim
Patrick.
Yeah.
Because he reminds me of Tim Patrick, but he's not 30 coming off of 2 ACL tears back to back. And I hate saying that because I love Tim Patrick.
Yep.
But am I wrong? Like, is that crazy? Here's
the thing. I'm fine. I think Sean Payton loves Tim Patrick. I think he absolutely loves him. And I think that there is definitely a road which still leads to Patrick being on, and I wouldn't hate it, I think for me, the way that I've been looking at this, Brandon, is exactly the way that we have been looking at it with Samaje Perine in the running back room. It's got absolutely nothing to do with the talent of Patrick, and it's got nothing to do with the talent of Perine, despite his volleyball bobble that resulted in an interception, which was bad thing for him and him staying on the roster, if you will, long term for Pirine. But you cannot deny the talent of Pirine. But you also cannot deny the youth movement that is happening within that room, despite the fact that Franklin is struggling and Vele improving in the way that he is. That's why I think that with Franklin and everything, I think there's a very much a possibility that you do keep 7. And I think that Vele is a large reason why, whether they keep Tim Patrick or not. So I think it's just more about how youthful the movement is in that wide receiver room. And it's something that, Payton's going to be talking ad nauseum about, or has talked about, which is it's the youth of the room. But the unfortunate thing you can't, and this is something you and I have been bringing up, and we'll bring it up till the dogs come home. And it's something that, sadly fans can't ignore it. And that is just unfortunately his injuries. You know what I mean? Like, is that the injuries? And I think that, to David's point, just here, could you get a draft pick? I don't think you can. It would probably, I would imagine, be an outright cut.
Yeah, you're not getting a pick for Tim. Maybe like a 7th round swap for someone who just wants him, doesn't have to go through the free agent process. But I don't even think that.
But things have been really surprising before. I mean, George Payton is actually a master when it comes to actually, eking out some draft capital for players and stuff like that. So I wouldn't be the least bit surprised, if they're able to get something for him. But Vele, there is no doubt that he's been really impressive. I think for me, and I'll just tie a bow on this for my sake, I still think Tim Patrick is on this team. But it's very much a conversation, though, about Vele, and what he could possibly do with, Tim Patrick possibly, and, moving on from Patrick.
I'm pretty sure we got a 6th, or it was like a 6-7 swap or something for Alberto.
I think you're thinking of Trinity Benson on that one.
Maybe it was Trinity Benson.
Yeah. But I mean, what were some of the other things that I thought? I mean, we can touch a little bit more on the. Why don't we?
It was Alberto and a 7th for a 6th. So we did get a pick back, but go ahead.
I want to circle back on the quarterback conversation from not the Bo Nix side of things, because I mean we'll be talking about Bo. He was as impressive as ever, and I really like the fact that we got the chance from Mike's perspective, talking about when he was in college and with Colorado, and then getting the chance to see who they were, and then how really it wasn't as surprising for him to see him do what he was able to do. I want to just more circle on the real conversation here, and obviously all roads are leading, to Bo Nix, being the starter. You know why?
Mm-hmm.
We're in the end game now.
That's right. We're in the end game now. Anyway, but
go ahead.
But the whole point that I was wanting to go with is it's the quarterback 2 debate. And I know that I've had this conversation before in terms of my theory, and that is they should keep 3, roll with Jarrett Stidham as their quarterback 2, and then next year you end up moving forward with the idea of with Zach Wilson as your quarterback 2. The twist here, the twist here is the more things unfold in the sense that Zach Wilson is very clearly a game player versus a practice player. Because Brandon, like all the stuff that's coming out of camp, practice, is Zach Wilson has been all over the map, the ups and the downs, more downs than up. You know what I mean? And in and in the game, there's an argument to be made. He was actually the best quarterback of the bunch. So I think if he plays that way for the second preseason game and the third preseason game, there is a legit conversation to be made based on cost savings and going younger that they still roll with 2 quarterbacks, but instead of Jarrett Stidham as your quarterback 2, it's Zach Wilson as quarterback 2. So it's a very real conversation to be had. And what say you on that? Because it's
go ahead.
No.
I talked about it a bit earlier. Like, I do think having a guy that has a similar physical skill set in terms of the rushing ability as your backup and the same as your starter is like a good thing, because you're able to have a more than one-dimensional aspect of your game. Not that Jarrett Stidham can't move, because he can, but just definitely not to the same extent. But I do think that, I don't know, I wouldn't be surprised if Zach Wilson winds up as the kind of the backup. We did trade for him after all. And I mean, it kind of sounded like the camp that he was really struggling, but you get into the game action, he looked pretty good. Like, there was one specific play that doesn't show up on the stat sheet, where he basically threw just an absolute dart, like probably 40 yards on a rope up the seam to Marvin Mims, and it got broken up, and it was like a bit of a behind throw. Like, it wasn't a perfect throw. I don't think the guy was going to be able to make a pick on it, because he had to like lay out to knock it down. But if he puts that just slightly more in front, or leads Marvin Mims a little bit more, like, that was a potential like run into the end zone 50-yard touchdown. And I don't know. I just think Zach Wilson just has more upside than Jarrett Stidham does. Mm-hmm. And it's a weird kind of thing to go through in terms of like the analysis on a backup quarterback, because like, what was the statistic? Like 65 quarterbacks played last year.
65.
Like, you're going to have a backup quarterback play. Like, that's just the reality,
or at least expect it.
Expect it.
Yeah.
But like, look, I don't think that it's realistic to have the expectation that your backup has to also be as good as your starter. Like, yeah, you can expect that you're going to have to play a backup. And as long, like, I'm not saying throw anyone out there, but I think having someone that has, I would rather have some upside that I can lean on if I have to play my backup in the sense of the athleticism sense than not. And that's just my opinion. And yeah, could it suck more because Zach Wilson is definitely more of a gunslinger? He could turn the ball over more, sure. Yeah. But I don't know. That's just like where my head is at. And I think it depends on what we see in the rest of the preseason.
Well, and again, let's not ignore the fact that there was a time last year where it fell off the rails, but there was a reason why the Jets were actually a little bit far more competitive than they needed to be. A large part of that was the fact that it was Zach Wilson playing within himself and playing within the system, despite who that offensive coordinator was, and he was actually holding that ship afloat a few times in games, and for half the season, and he was playing within himself. I mean, like, he was playing really smart football. I mean, Scott Mason will kind of tell you that. We'll do a show with him, of course, as we do every single year lately, since it seems like the Broncos play the Jets every single year. But into Northcutt Productions, as he's mentioning, I think the third game will be interesting, whether or not we do get some trade conversation and whether or not we get some just in general, just from the quarterback side of things, and not just the quarterback side of things, but all the other positions. From Zach's side of things, I don't know if a team will trade for him, but you can definitely bank on the fact, and as we're talking, Brandon, the upside side of things, they definitely do bank on upside. So is a team like Minnesota, funny enough, getting Sam Darnold's already there, so funny enough, getting Zach Wilson would be very hilarious, by the way. But for Jarrett Stidham, I think that's a very interesting conversation in the sense that does the team trade for Jarrett Stidham? Does the team actually trade a 5th to 7th round draft pick for Jarrett Stidham? And then maybe pay the remainder of the salary, or because I think they save $6 to $8 million or something if they cut him, or what have you. So I mean, like, do they take on the remaining of his salary? For Stidham. So I think it's going to be the third game for sure from the quarterback side of things. Could end up being one where it's a showcase for a quarterback too. And we've seen that before, right, Brendan? I mean, like, look at Josh Dobbs. Josh Dobbs was one of those people who was one of the 65, 68, quarterbacks that played last year. Well, I think he was on the Arizona Cardinals, was traded to the Cleveland Browns, and Cleveland Browns, and then from the Cleveland Browns went to the Minnesota Vikings or something. So I mean, so he moved around and then went to the Minnesota Vikings and actually kept that team rather afloat fair amount of the season. So, it definitely can happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think part of like this too is obviously we have 3 quarterbacks on this roster already, but we need to also see what happens with the camp cuts around the league, and maybe there's someone else we can kind of pick up there, but not that I think that's going to happen, because I think Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson have kind of looked good enough to be like, to prove that like it needs to come from maybe one of those 2 guys. But in my opinion, like, we are talking about the backup here. Like, right. Bo Nix is obviously the starter, even if he doesn't open as the starter, which I think he will. Like, he's going to be the starter
that way for sure.
And it's all about who's going to win that backup spot. And it is important because you're going to have to likely play your backup. I think both of these guys could do it. Could there be someone else around the league that we could pick up from a cut? Sure. But I'm just interested to see what happens in the final preseason games. Obviously, while we want to watch Bo, and it sounds like he's going to get a lot of the snaps against the Packers, which will be nice. But definitely that backup spot is going to be interesting to watch.
I will say this. If they keep it the same as we're moving forward, and we'll talk about something else here with the preseason game and then obviously what's next. But it'll be really interesting to see if Sean Payton handles this game against the Packers the exact same way, in just a completely different way, but the exact same way from the side of things, which was Stidham. I think it was like 11 or 12 snaps. And then Bo Nix came in and played still with the ones, right? He still played with the ones. If he does the exact same thing but reversed, which is Nix gets 11 to 12 snaps, Stidham comes in and he plays a fair amount, I think at that point, he's very much keeping the open mind of, it's not Bo Nix's, in the leader in the clubhouse to actually be starting, week 1. We're still very much looking at things and having things be fluctuate. So I'm very curious to see, how all of that will unfold from that standpoint. I still am of the impression that he will get a fair amount, Nix, meaning the first team reps. But I think the other thing that I'm very much looking forward to in another conversation, Brandon, as we kind of go back to somewhat of the wide receiver conversation, do we see a wide receiver or a few wide receivers play a bit longer than they should? Marvin Mims, you heard Mike Sanford make the point of he's had a rather quiet training camp. And I think that I'm not going to read too much into the fact about how, he played into the third quarter with Zach Wilson, because I think that it was just more about the idea of wanting them to feature him more in year 2. And so it's just about getting him comfortable, getting him used to the idea of, playing a little bit more into the offense. And obviously it just so happened that he played with, Bo Nix and Jarrett Stidham and, Zach Wilson. On the surface, it looks really bad. Like, why in preseason, why is, possibly your wide receiver playing, a little bit longer, into the preseason. So I think given with where Nix is, if he does play rather long, how will it shake out with some of those other players in that wide receiver room, like a Marvin Mims? Will Mims get that exact same treatment, which is Stidham, and Zach Wilson? Because if that trend continues where he's playing with all 3 quarterbacks, I'm a little bit worried at that point. If that trend continues a little bit.
Maybe I don't know that I think that would happen, to be honest. Like, I think the other wide receivers in this room have done so much that you kind of need to play the depth more in these final preseason games just to see who gets it. Like, they're so good. Like,
And in particular,
you have to have, you have to have game reps. I think you're going to see a lot of Troy Franklin, honestly, for good or for bad. But I don't really think. I think Marvin Mims, you're going to maybe see him featured more, but I don't think you're going to see him be playing a lot of the game. I think maybe I'm wrong, but like I do think it's going to be more of like Sills and Johnson and the guys that are kind of, and Bandy, the guys that are further down that depth chart that have looked good and could earn that roster spot. Marvin Mims is on the roster. He's on the roster, and you like, yes, you want to get some game time with him, but you need some meaningful game film on these other guys to make your decision on who's it going to be.
But I agree. If there is a wide receiver that's going to end up being featured either with Knicks, or the fair amount of into the third quarter, I would venture to guess that Troy Franklin is your best bet. Absolutely. What are some of the other things as we transition a little bit more to and people that are in the chat? Sorry, we didn't get a chance to pull up some of these comments. I see David, friend of the program, says, yeah, Zach needs to get a full year. But yeah, feel free to chime in the comments. What are some of the things that stood out to you from preseason? We'll still get them aired. And what are the things that you're most looking forward to with the preseason, against the Packers, or specifically the joint practice, right? And I think that that's one of the things that is going to be so beneficial for not just the Broncos, but the Packers, is that because I think that, right, like it used to be, Brandon, how sometimes the joint practice would not necessarily be a team that they would be playing in a preseason. Sometimes it would just be like a team, another team, and then they play, a completely different team, like for a preseason game. So I like the idea, at least from the Broncos side of things, and when they did it with the Vikings, like a couple of years back, that they did the joint practice with the Vikings, and they do the preseason with the preseason game with the team. So I like the idea that they're going to do a joint practice with the Packers, and then you're going to see the preseason with the Packers. So you might get a chance to see things boil over. And I will say to David Talks Broncos, as we roll things here, he did have that fumble, but boy, did Blake Watson look.
Dude, Blake Watson. I want to see more Blake Watson.
Yeah. I will say this. I'm curious to see who's faster in a race, Jaleel McLaughlin or Blake Watson. That's the content that I need coming out of at a training camp. But yeah, he was fast. I mean, like, he was super, super fast. I mean, that touchdown, was it the toss play? It was like they tossed it and he was in the end zone like that.
Yeah. Dude can ball. He's fast.
Did it worry you about the running back room some, though? I mean, because I know some people, it seemed like, are somewhat mixed a little bit, maybe with Estime in particular.
No, not with Estime. I don't know if Sabaje Perine makes this roster.
Yeah.
Estime didn't really worry me that much.
The only thing I will say is he's got to at least have a head on a swivel a little bit more.
Yeah.
The fumble, as much as it was a better play by the defensive back, and he did come a little bit, behind him, and so he really couldn't see him. He's got to have his head on a swivel a little bit and protect the ball better, because job security is ball security, as they see in the NFL. And so I'm very curious to see what happens. But as much as we like P. Ryan in general, the talent and how reliable he had been last year, with the with his 2-minute drill, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if they do move on from him, or as something's been mentioned before, they actually get something out of him. They trade him to some team, and as to bring it up again, as Northcutt was mentioning, maybe that's the player where they showcase just a little bit more, and they get something out of him. But yeah, I'm very curious to see about that running back room, though, Brandon. And one of the things that I thought was really impressive as we move forward a little bit with some of the other positions. And this is to a subtle point about Bo Nix, but I liked the idea that when Lucas Kroll had his fumble and they got it back a little bit, they went right back to him. And oh, by the way, kudos to Bo on the play that he hit Lucas Kroll with. It might be one of the first times I've ever seen a player, a quarterback, check out of a screenplay, like not throw it at the dirt, waste a play, like check out of the play, and then scramble drill, if you will, and find Lucas Kroll wide open. And
there were some nice plays to Lucas Kroll. I know he had the fumble that shouldn't have happened, but other than that, I mean, he had some nice plays.
Yeah, and Dulcich, I mean, like for the short bit of time that we got a chance to see him, you got a chance to see possibly how, effective he could even be in the middle of the field. He didn't catch the ball, and it was one of Bo Nix's, rough throws. But I mean, even then, it was his only read. He was able to, throw it into a certain location where Dulcich could get it, but it was just a bang bang play overall. But yeah, I thought that, all things considered, the tight end room I thought was rather solid. Nate Atkins had a couple block problems, like a couple block reps that I thought were somewhat of an issue. But I mean, clearly you can still see how reliable he is as a blocker on the QB power run that they did for Nix. So you got a chance to see his versatility there on some of those runs and possibly what they could do for Michael Burton. So, but yeah, what were some other things, Brendan, that really kind of caught your eye that maybe some people haven't necessarily, mentioned?
I think the main thing is just going to be the battle at center to me and how that's going to play out. I don't know. I mean, Alex Forsythe looked good, but go ahead.
No, Wattenberg looked good too.
Wattenberg looked, I think he might have looked a bit better, to be honest, which is like a surprise and a good surprise because like I was a little bit worried about center, to be honest, when it was like just kind of you had the assumption that it was just going to be Forsythe, and I think Forsythe is a good center, but like he's a rookie coming in, like that's a very tough ask. But seeing Luke Wattenberg kind of emerge was surprising, and I want to see like how that continues to play out with that battle. But I think he looked good. I want to see what happens against the Packers, who's going to be starting at center. And it was kind of interesting to me. I mean, like obviously the NFL is a different game, but you would think that Forsythe and Nix would have maybe like at least a little bit more chemistry.
Yeah.
And I think he was the center on the botched snap that turned into the fumble.
It was Wattenberg.
Was it Wattenberg? Oh, well, ignore everything I just said then. Never mind. Forsythe looked better. I thought it was a Forsythe that was on the botched exchange. But there were a few snaps that kind of looked a bit iffy, to be honest, outside of that one. But I didn't realize that was Wattenberg. I thought that was Forsythe. Okay.
Yeah, Bonnie says
maybe Forsythe is better than I was like going off of that being like the biggest issue that I saw.
But I think that
but I mean, I still think Luke Wattenberg brings good competition to that position. Like I want to see what happens there, but
I still think you're onto something because like it's worth mentioning just from the snap side of things. Wattenberg spent his entirety in that preseason game at center.
Yeah.
Forsythe, who we thought was a pure center coming in, had some snaps at right guard and I think left guard.
Mm-hmm.
So is that your identifier or identifier for who's going to be your starting center is, Wattenberg, spent his entire time at center. I think that there's a lot of ways that you could look at that. Was it just that they wanted Wattenberg to get the full reps so that he can groom a little bit more. I think that's a certain side of it, at center, because we certainly know that he can play guard, right? Because we certainly know that he can play guard. But Forsyth, on the other hand, we don't know whether or not he can play guard. And so maybe the Broncos are still keeping their options open. I think this is kind of like where I'm looking at it. But like, are they just keeping their options open and they are just wanting to see what Forsyth could do at right guard or left guard, in a pinch? He'll still be part of the 8 offensive linemen, 7 offensive linemen that they want to keep. The question is just, can he do it? Can he be that, player that they're going to hold on to, for that can play that left and right guard. It's something that because that, like, as far as the comfortability, I'm not worried overall with the comfortability of Alex and Bo, just because it's there. Because and I feel like for me, it's like it will probably take a game or two with them, but the moment you basically rekindle the fire that was there for 2022. Like they're going to get it back. Like it'll get to the point where that's going to end up being fine. So, and I think what'll be a nice identifier for the starting center role is much to what I'm looking for with the quarterback position, which is, what was it? Stidham with 11 snaps and then Bo coming in and still with the ones. Do they do that with the center position where you get a chance to see Wattenberg there and you get a chance to see Forsyth there? If they alternate that, that's going to be very interesting. Bonnie, we mentioned this a little bit, but the cornerback position, I'm very curious to see, as I think you and I mentioned before, Brandon, I'm very curious to see what does happen with Levi Wallace, because I think that if you are going to be looking at it from the side of, it's a rough way to say it, but like, who was it? Because, on the show last night, we were doing risers and fallers, right? Who was a riser? Who was a faller? I felt like Levi Wallace was a faller, but he had nothing to do with it. You know what I mean? And he was a faller just because of the performance of everybody else and the fact that he's just unfortunately been injured. So I don't know. I would love to still keep him on the roster, but the question is just going to end up being what will he be like in game action? He's been great in camp. Some people have argued he's actually been cornerback 2 in camp, but he's not out there. He's not been out there. And then the game action that we saw, I thought Quentin Newsome actually looked pretty solid. I thought, Newsome, I think he had a pass deflection, so I mean, when you see some of these other players, Art Green, I think, had a concussion. The question is just going to be what will his health be, for that preseason game. But, like we said, Math has played really, really well. Chris Abrams-Drain played really, really well. Riley Moss played really, really well. So I'm curious about it personally with what they do with Levi Wallace now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He needs to get back out there. That's the biggest thing. And like, obviously it depends on his health, but so I'm interested to see what happens.
Piggybacking off of the risers and fallers, though, who were some risers and fallers for you from the preseason game with the Colts, and then piggybacking and even continuing that, who are the players that have the most to prove or that you are kind of keeping an eye on now as we transition a little bit to the Packers game now?
Risers and fallers in the sense of, like, are you saying from that game, or like, are we talking about a preview of
risers?
I'm confused.
Both risers and fallers from the
both. And like how that's going to translate to the Packers.
Yeah. And then
got it. Yeah. I mean, you can't say that Bo Nix wasn't a riser. Like, that's got to be the number 1A answer. I do think Zach Wilson was a riser, just based on what I thought of him going into the game. Like, from what we've heard in camp, I definitely didn't it sounded like he wasn't doing that well. So to see him play better than I expected him to, he was a riser for sure. Like I want to see how that carries into the Packers, but Bo Nix for sure, like 100% obvious riser. Chris Abrams drain. That really, like, I don't know if I'd say he's a riser because it wasn't like he was making some plays in camp, but just like to see how he played.
Yeah.
I want to see more of that for sure. And I think I'd say Jaleel McLaughlin was a little bit of a riser as well, just with kind of how you saw him utilized. Vele for sure. Like Vele's been skyrocketing already.
I wouldn't even say he's a riser. I mean, like
I don't know if that's a riser. Like he's never been. He continues to go up. He's been going up the whole time.
He fits the category for sure. Like,
Yeah.
and I don't argue it at all. But it's just like with what you hear from camp, and that being the first preseason game, it's like you can definitely see why he would be a riser for sure. And he's just been so impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I said Zach Wilson yesterday, just from the standpoint of everything that you've been mentioning about how he was in camp and everything we've been mentioning even throughout the show. How he looked in camp. And then he arguably was maybe the best quarterback on Sunday. I mean, and I think that the thing that people forget about for long term with the quarterback position for the Broncos is the team, if they keep Wilson and move on from Stidham, they will have one of the better playmaking quarterbacks in terms of both of them on a roster. I mean, Zach Wilson can very clearly do playmaking in the pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Nick can do playmaking in the pocket. I think they really do feed off of one another really, really well. And so I think it'll be really beneficial long-term if they're able to still keep that intact with Zach Wilson and Bo Nix. Just for their overall development, I think it'll be great. But yeah, so Zach Wilson is definitely a riser for sure. And actually, I got one that was a definite riser, and this is something that is not a lot of people were mentioning it. But I thought Keandre Smith played really well. He had that interception, but it looked like he was all over the field. I think his number's 43. I think he's an outside linebacker or something, like an off-ball linebacker. But I thought that he played really well. Looked like he was all over the field and rushing the passer and getting into the backfield. So I thought he played well. And I guess just if we are going to be talking about riser, you've got to mention Damari Mathis, don't you? Like, here's a guy who has been truly what felt like in the doghouse, right, Brandon? Like, even going back to maybe last year, then he goes out and has the preseason of his life, and plays really well and plays to the level of what we had seen in 2022, the end of 2022. So I think a riser is definitely, Mathis. And then on the offensive side of the ball, I thought some of the offensive line was great. We didn't get a chance to talk much more about the offensive line, but I thought the offensive,
Definitely.
I thought that there were other pieces of the offensive line that were great. The run blocking was one of the biggest things, and it wasn't just the center position, Brandon. But I thought that the tackles were great. Matt Peart, I thought, had a bit some moments, but I thought that Peart looked okay. And Alex Pavcheski, no surprise there, he was great. From what I was able to see, Frank Crum, especially in run blocking. Pass blocking, I thought left a little bit, more to be desired. But the run blocking in general and as a whole, I thought was great. And obviously, I will say this from the riser side of things: they paid him a lot of money. But the two ones that I thought were great in that game were Ben Powers and Mike McGlinchey. McGlinchey, I thought, and Powers were fantastic in that Colts game.
Yeah, I was hesitant to try to heap too much praise on the offensive line so far just because of like one preseason game against backups, and I didn't want to get my hopes up too much. But no, they definitely looked great. I don't think we had a single sack all game. We didn't give up a single sack, right? I have to double check, but I'm pretty sure that's accurate.
Yeah, so I'm very curious to see if this is going to continue. Obviously, it could be a Emmanuel Wilson revenge game for a preseason game. I'm sure you saw those comments that came out of like, "Oh yeah, the Broncos cut me," and you know, people use bulletin board material, but it's interesting to, certainly use a preseason game as possible bulletin board material. But again, like if a team cut you, you always have a tendency to kind of use that as fuel. So, but all in all, though, I'm very much looking forward to seeing what the second preseason is going to bring, and specifically the joint practice. I will be there for practice on the 16th, so Friday, and make sure you stay tuned for that. And hopefully we can get a chance to get Sanford on for a little bit longer. It was a really fun 30-minute segment to get a chance to talk about it with him, talk about specifically Bo Nix, what he saw, when he was at, CU. And I thought it was interesting when he talked about it from the CU side of things, where he literally got a chance to see all four of the quarterbacks. Obviously Cam Rising's going to end up being a quarterback. I want to say it's in this upcoming draft in 2025, but Cam Rising was one of them. Caleb Williams was one of them. Penix was one of them. And, Bo was one of them. And he saw him in just that entire week. I thought was interesting. So if you guys get a chance to go back and listen to that, it really was a really good and in-depth 30-minute segment.
Yeah, absolutely.
But any final thoughts, Brandon?
It's about time.
We're in the end game now.
Nice.
That's right.
More Broncos football. Yeah.
What are you going to do for the second preseason game? It's late. It's like a 6:00 game.
Drink coffee.
Drink coffee. I'll be there. I'll be there in person. And by the way, can we talk about how fresh and clean those new uniforms looked, by the way?
They're still growing on me. They're still growing on me a little bit, not gonna lie. But they were clean.
I mean, I thought the all white was killer. And I think we're getting the Summit Whites again.
Well, I'm glad you like it, because I think I'm pretty sure that's like by far the most worn uniform on the schedule this year, if I'm remembering correctly. I think they're only wearing the blues like one time.
Just hope that the NFL can bend the rules just a little bit, and they can give us the true Summit White uniform, which is the white helmet and white tops and white pants. So hopefully, we can get that work. But of course, and I'm sure everybody's seen it, but I went and I created a whole combination as far as all the combinations, for their uniforms and everything else. I did that on Madden 25, which actually came out. I think it was yesterday, or the official one is today or something. But I went through and I did all the combinations as much as I could come up with, and it was a lot of fun. It was a fun little small exercise. So Brandon, if you haven't gotten a chance to see it, I was able to kind of craft some of the one of my favorite ones that I will say that I made, and I will at least give a shout out for this one, was the white helmet, orange tops, white pants, orange socks. So almost like the orange dreamsicle look for the Broncos. And I'm hoping illegal or legal. I saw that one. Illegal or legal, but I'm hoping they're at least able to pull that one off, because I thought that one was pretty nice. So for Brandon and myself, make sure you follow us over there on Twitter. Brandon is on private, so if you are going to want to follow him,
hey, I keep an eye on the follow requests, but I just had to do it because I'm not a Hornets player.
No, it's okay, but just know that
I'm so sick of it.
Just know that he's on private, so you got to request to follow him, and the real test will be if he follows you back. But no, make sure you follow him at Brandon Miller PO. It's right there, and myself at Cameron Parker PO. He and I both use the Manely Broncos Twitter account at Manely Broncos. So make sure you follow the show handle as well at Manely Broncos. And a reminder too, we won't drop the link, but we do have a shop that you guys can go forward and get some swag. Brandon is a bit behind the 8 ball. He hasn't gotten any Manely Broncos swag yet. He's a bit poor.
I have a hat and polo
from the other store. I should say, from the other store.
I have swag.
But make sure you go and get your swag over there on the MHRT Network shop, and so make sure you do that. Follow myself, as I said, at Ken Parker PO, Brandon at Brandon Miller PO. It's been an absolute blast. We will be back for another episode of the Manely Broncos podcast next Wednesday, barring if we decide to get another guest. We've got to fluctuate. I don't think I'll be volunteering for the BMW Championship. I want to say it's from Tuesday to Friday. And depending on my work schedule, I might be able to actually work it to where I'm able to, do the Manely Broncos podcast on Wednesday if I'm not actually working that day. So we still might be able to do a show, but it should be a lot of fun. It's actually at the Castle Pines Golf Club. If you guys are there by chance, I can't mingle too much or if any, but I mean, it'd be nice to kind of, see you guys. If you guys are fans of the Manely Broncos podcast and, you guys are there, it'd be nice to kind of stop and say hi. But it was a lot of fun. Make sure you guys like and subscribe, for the MHRT Network over on YouTube. It would be greatly appreciated. Make sure you tell your friends all about the Manely Broncos podcast. Want to say a quick thank you again to Mike Sanford for hopping on the show and the work that he does over there at Altitude Radio 92.5. Great human being and a great follow over there on social media. Make sure you follow him. He's a tremendous dude. So thank you guys so much for hopping on for another episode of Manely Broncos. It's been an absolute blast. Take care.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flame out. So high, I might never come down, so what, this is my lifestyle.